In the Bible, on 2 Samuel chapter 6. I'm going to read from chapter 6 to chapter 10. The ark brought to Jerusalem. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring from up there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who was enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart, with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals.
What?
Nothing. Just be quiet, please. Sorry. Was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart, with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God, because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom from the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the ark of God." So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. Then those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps. He sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf, wearing a linen ephod. David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of the Israelites, both men and women, and all the people went to their homes. It is New International Version. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord, who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Chapter 7. God's promise to David. After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a house of cedar while the ark of God remains in a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." But that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock." David's public dance of joy. An unavoidable question dangles over David's life. How can anyone so obviously flawed against the reputation as a man after God's own heart? A scene described in 2 Samuel chapter 6 may point to an answer. In one of the first official acts David sends for the sacred Ark of God that had been captured by the Philistines half a century before. He plans to install it in Jerusalem, the new capital city. This symbolic move will underscore that God, not a human king, is the true ruler of Israel. It takes a few false starts to get the Ark of Jerusalem. Disregarding God's explicit instructions, the Israelites try to transport the Ark on an ox cart. The method of the Philistines used to parade their gods rather than on the shoulders of the Levites as God has commanded. Somebody dies. David gets mad and the Ark sits in a private home for 3 months. Out of the control. Nevertheless, when the Ark finally does move to Jerusalem to the accompaniment of a brass band and huge shouts of a huge crowd, King David completely loses control. Wild with joy, he does cartwheels in the streets. The scene of a dignified king doing backflips in a scanty robe breaks every rule of royal etiquette. David's wife, scandalized, reproaches him. But David sets her straight. It is God, no one else, before whom he is dancing, and he cares not what anyone else thinks as long as his one-person audience senses his jubilation. In short, David, a man of passion, feels more passionately about the God of Israel than about anything else in the world. That message gets broadcast to the entire nation. Tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth, and I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore, as they did at the beginning, and I've done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands, but my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan reported David all the words of this entire revelation. David's prayer. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family, that you have brought me this far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. And in this decree, sovereign Lord, is for a mere human. What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, sovereign Lord. For the sake of your word and according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. 100 people you should know. Let your conscience be your guide. That's good advice only if your conscience doesn't cheat. Most people find ways to soothe their consciences by rationalizing whatever they want to do. That's why it's best to check with trustworthy people for advice. Ancient rulers had an additional problem. Since few people had the courage to contradict an all-powerful king, such kings tended to get favorable advice even if they were doing something dead wrong. As one Roman senator said to Tiberius Caesar, "If you speak first, no one will want to refute you, and if you speak last, we will not want to have spoken against your position." Only a few brave souls dared to be different. The prophet Nathan, for example, told the king the truth, pleasant or not. Nathan burst David's bubble by informing him that God did not want him to build a temple. He also spoke up to remind David of his neglected promise to crown Solomon as his successor. Most memory, Nathan accused David of sinning against God by committing adultery with Bathsheba and murdering her husband. Chapter 12. Nathan did so artfully, trapping the king with a powerful story that aroused the king's fury, until Nathan drove home the point. Nathan could have died for bringing this message, but it was a measure of David's character that he listened to Nathan even when his own conscience had gone numb. When David repented, Nathan stood beside him, assuring him of God's forgiveness. Nathan was a true prophet. Though biblical prophets sometimes predicted the future, as Nathan did in describing the punishments David would suffer, they were best known for telling the truth, especially the unpleasant truth that no one wanted to hear. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16, God's great promise. The Lord's promise to David, "Your throne will be established forever," suggested that the Israelites would never lack the leadership they needed. This promise was one of a series of covenants between God and his people, with Abraham, see Genesis 12, with Moses at Sinai, and now with David. The New Testament sees this promise fulfilled in Jesus, the Son of David, and King of Kings forever. How great you are, sovereign Lord! There was no one like you, and there was no God but you, as we have heard with our own ears, and who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, and to make a name for himself, and to perform great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, Lord, have become their God. And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then people will say, "The Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established in your sight." Lord Almighty, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, "I will build a house for you." So your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you, sovereign Lord. You are God. Your covenant is trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, sovereign Lord, have spoken, and with your blessing the house of your servant will be blessed forever. I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. Then he took Metheg-Ammah from the control of the Philistines. David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them with a length of cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. Sorry. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought him tribute. Moreover, David defeated Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. When he went to restore his monument at the Euphrates River, David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David took the gold shields that belonged to the officers of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Teba, from Berothai, towns that belonged to Hadadezer, King David took a great quantity of bronze. When Tau, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with Tau. Joram brought with him articles of silver, of gold, and of bronze. And I am sorry to people who know what the pronunciations are, but I'm kind of guessing on them. King David dedicated these articles to the Lord, as he had done with the silver and gold from all the nations he had subdued, Edom and Moab, the Ammonites and the Philistines, and Amalek. He also dedicated the plunder taken from Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. Not ready for chariots. Chariots were as great as an innovation in weaponry as guns and were centuries later. However, chariots required trained charioteers. Since David hamstrung all but 100 chariot horses, he may have lacked such trained personnel. The Israelites could defend the mountains where chariots were of little use, but they were not ready to take on big armies of the surrounding plains. And David became famous after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He put garrisons through Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David's officials. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Seraiah was secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and Pelethites, and David's sons were priests. Answer any questions right now if any of you guys have any. If not, I'll just keep reading. David and Mephibosheth. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. The members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. Saul's lame grandson. Although David had been David's worst enemy, Saul had been David's worst enemy, David consistently showed kindness and generosity to Saul's family. In other kingdoms of that day, Mephibosheth would have been killed. David instead sought him out, restored his land, and welcomed him as a permanent guest at the royal table, a considerable honor. Later, when Mephibosheth suspiciously failed to join David in fleeing from Absalom's insurrection, David gave him the benefit of the doubt. Chapter 10. David defeats the Ammonites. In the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite commanders said to Hanun, their lord, Do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it? So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, Stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back. When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in battle formation at the entrance of their city gate, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him, so he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. Joab said, If the Arameans are too strong for me, then you are to come to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue you. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people in the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight. Then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the Ammonites realized that the Arameans were fleeing, they fled before Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer and Hadarameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River. They went to Helam with Shobak, the commander of Hadadezer's army, leading them. When David was told this, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Helam. The Arameans formed their battle lines to meet David and fought against him, but they fled before Israel, and David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobak, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings who were vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. 100 people you should know. Bathsheba. The story of David and Bathsheba has enthralled storytellers for thousands of years. It has launched 1,000 sermons and been the subject of novels and movies. David's part inevitably dominates, for he is the great king, the military hero and poet credited with half of all our psalms. How a man with such love for God fell into immorality and murder, how he was conquered by lust and the need to protect his reputation, is the subject of unending fascination. What about Bathsheba? We know she was very beautiful and the wife of Uriah, who was the leader in the army and a man of great moral character. Not much more is said about Bathsheba, but inevitably storytellers fill in the blanks. What often emerges as Bathsheba is as a seductress. What was she doing, taking a bath where David could see her? How was it she was so willing to abandon her marriage for the king's bed? The Bible's storytelling doesn't lend any credibility to such speculations. Bathsheba could hardly help being beautiful, and in all probability she was bathing quite innocently. When she caught David's eye, houses then had no bathrooms. When he summoned her, she had to obey. A woman in ancient Israel had very little say in matters outside the home, and certainly not with the king. She suffered for what she could not help. She lost her husband and a child. After bearing another child, Solomon, she receives no further mention in Scripture until the very end of David's life, when she supported Solomon's bid for the throne. I read about 3 chapters a night, or 5 chapters a night. I'm going to do this same thing tomorrow night. If you all want to watch again, then be my guest. See you tomorrow.